It's part 2 of the story, The Rise and Fall of Troy Bainton. It's called The Fall and Its Aftermath. On Saturday afternoon in late September, the sun shone warmly down from a cloudless blue sky. But the oppressive heat of July and August had dissipated. Pastor Troy officiated at the wedding of Helen and Chessie in an expensively tailored dove grey suit, a light grey shirt, and a tie in a deeper shade of grey. Chessie and his groomsmen were attired in white tuxedos with royal blue cummerbunds and royal blue boutonnieres. Bride's strapless dress in the palest ivory featured a long train and partial veil, while her attendants were clad in ankle-length dresses in a shade of aubergine. The couple exchanged their vows in the traditional words, unaware that these came not from the mouth of Jesus Christ himself, but from the Book of Common Prayer of the Episcopal Church. I, Chester, take thee, Helen, to be my lawful wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to obey, till death us do part, according to God's holy ordinance, and thereto I give thee my troth. And then similarly for Helen. The hall was elaborately decorated for the occasion, with acres of tulle, banks of flowers, and a triumphal arch through which the newlyweds entered. They were followed by the 400 guests, who then had to stand in a receiving line before shaking hands with the bridal couple and their parents. Consistent with the ideas of the prosperity gospel, the event was not dry, as in so many evangelical establishments. As the Ecclesiastes had opined, every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labour. It is the gift of God. Alcoholic punch was served prior to dinner, and champagne with the meal and for the toasts. Those desiring something a little stronger afterwards were expected to be discreet about it. The reception might appropriately have been described as a rollicking good time. By the time the speeches were made, the noise level in the banqueting hall had reached a decibel level more typical of a nightclub. Strenuous efforts were needed to quiet the room for the toasts. The best man made a suitably witty and slightly off-colour speech, which was enthusiastically received. Some of the tables were then moved for dancing. The bride, after the briefest sojourn in the ladies' room, returned with the long train of her strapless bridal gown, ingeniously detached to transform the dress to knee length. Dancing then followed in the order required by etiquette: bride and groom, newlywed with own parent, newlywed with parent-in-law, and so on. Most of the 400 guests stayed on, the lights were turned down, and the band played numbers suited to both the parent generation as well as the younger set. It was at this point that a biblical literalist might say that God and Satan were having a bit of a discussion. Then God might have told Satan what a great guy Pastor Troy was, a really wonderful pastor and popular with the folks at Woodlands Bible Church. And Satan might have replied, I bet he wouldn't be all holier than thou if he didn't have it so good. What if he lost all the good things in life, his family and his nice house? He'd probably curse you to your face. So in this interpretation, God made a deal with Satan. During the evening, the newly married Mrs. Helen Cheston IV Morgan approached her pastor during a break between dancing sets. Troy, could I see you for a few minutes? There's something about later tonight that I really need your advice about. Could we meet in your office? She gave him a look that could have been shy or could have been sly. It was not quite clear. It was one thing that all pastors are warned about, is not to get into high-risk situations. Being alone with a woman in your office at a wedding reception, a woman being the bride no less, away from all the guests and with both of you having consumed alcohol, surely has to be considered the highest of high-risk situations. In railroading terms, this was clearly a red light. Pastor Troy Bainton did not notice the red light warning of danger ahead, so he and Helen slipped away from the reception. Once outside, Helen slipped her arm companionably into Troy's. They took the covered brick walkway to the office block, which they entered by the side door adjacent to the chief pastor's office. Through carelessness, or perhaps the result of alcohol, Troy forgot that entry to the office block after hours would set off the alarm. Sounds alarm to ADT. Had he entered by the main entrance, he would have noticed the panel beside the door and unalarmed it. As soon as Helen and Troy went into Troy's office, Helen put her arms around him, gave him a passionate kiss and pulled him down onto the 3-seat Chesterfield with the silk upholstery in the middle of the office. "I want you before I have Chessie," she exclaimed breathlessly. "It's called droit de seigneur." Troy had another opportunity to pull back from disaster, but again he failed the test. Instead, he kissed Helen hungrily, then turned his attention to the top of her breasts, the part not covered by the strapless dress, which was demurely holding the aureoles and the nipples. Helen gave a tug at the dress and pulled the top down, revealing stark aureoles and nipples standing erect like tiny penises. Troy's final opportunity to avert disaster now presented itself as his cell phone, set to vibrate mode, buzzed in his pants pocket while he was engaged on the Chesterfield with Helen. However, his mind was so focused on matters of the moment that he decided the call would wait, little realizing the call originated with ADT, who were calling to report the intrusion of the alarm system. As Troy caressed her nipples with his tongue, Helen's body became increasingly agitated as she writhed beneath him. When he coiled his tongue around the left nipple, she pushed his chest away from her with both hands. In a stage whisper said urgently, "Lick me, lick me, lick me." And with that she lifted up the lower part of the dress, so it now sat like a floppy white cummerbund around her middle section, revealing that this iteration of the bridal outfit did not include undergarments. Meanwhile, since ADT had not been able to contact Troy, the first on their call list, they telephoned their backup, Rebecca. Rebecca took the call, looked around the banquet hall for Troy, and failing to locate him, decided that she should check out the office complex in case the intrusion might be real and not a false alarm. And by then it was dark, and so she did not want to go alone. She therefore approached Norbert Morgan, who since the construction of New Woodlands had been elected as a member of the Board of Elders, to accompany her. In the 10 minutes or so that it took for Rebecca to be called, contact Norbert and walk to the office suite, Helen and Troy had finished their business together and were now lying spent upon the Chesterfield. "I guess we'd better be going back before anyone misses us," said Troy, but he did not get up. By now Rebecca and Norbert had gained entrance to the office suite by the main door, had turned off the alarm, and were walking soundlessly down the carpeted hallway. Nothing seemed to be amiss except that the light was on in the chief pastor's office. The high-tech office suite had incorporated energy-saving motion sensor lights that turn on automatically when the room is occupied and off when the room is unoccupied. Clearly any intruder must be in that room. Taking her pass key to the office, Rebecca threw open the door. Both were thunderstruck at the sight that greeted them. Troy lay with his arms around Helen, half on, half off her. His boxer shorts and the pants of his expensive dark grey suit lay around his ankles. Helen struggled to a sitting position, trying with difficulty to reposition her generally proportionate breasts into the upper section of her wedding dress. Troy scrambled equally hard to hoist up his pants. "What the hell?" exclaimed Norbert. "Get up, both of you!" As Helen rose from the Chesterfield, she pulled down the lower half of her dress to regain a modicum of modesty, but everyone could see all too clearly the dark and damp stain on the silk fabric of the Chesterfield, where Helen's buttocks had rested. In the 5th century, St. Augustine had described the original sin and passed down to humanity through the generations in quasi-sexual terms. On this occasion, the stain of Adam intermingled all too obviously with the stain of Troy. Rebecca was speechless, but Norbert had enough to say for both of them. "You little tramp, you whore," he directed at Helen. Don't you think for a minute that you're going to sleep with my son after this. The wedding's off, I tell you. I don't care what happened this afternoon. If the pastor screws the bride, I guess that's good enough for an annulment. And as for you, he turned to Troy, the Board of Elders will meet on Monday morning and decide what's to be done with you. Turning back to Helen, he added viciously, get your clothes back on, you little slut. Don't come back to the reception, go back to your parents, they're used to scandals. Our family didn't expect to get used merchandise, but I guess we should have looked into your past more carefully, knowing what went on with Elsden. I bet we'd have found a fair bit of dirt under the fancy clothes. The party at the reception was still going strong. Quite possibly many guests did not realise that neither the newlyweds nor the parson nor his wife were now in attendance. Perhaps they imagined, if they thought about the matter at all, the bridal couple had already departed for their hotel prior to leaving for their honeymoon the next day. Later, back in the parson's residence, Troy faced Rebecca. Look, Bex. He'd always used the nickname of the famous soccer player David Beckham as a term of endearment. He said in a pleading tone, I'm truly sorry. I don't know what got into me. It'll never happen again, I promise. Rebecca, that loyal and ever submissive wife, now revealed a side of her personality that Troy had not witnessed before. You've done right at one. We are through. You can expect to hear from my lawyer. But Bex, please, listen. Don't Bex me, retorted Rebecca. This makes me realise just how much I've had it with you. You're a phony. Yes, I know all about the sermon service. I'm not blind. All those people on Sundays hanging on every word, and not one of them was really yours. The way you boss around the assistant pastor and the youth pastor. The way you have to have everyone always agree with you. You're not actually God, Troy, even if you think you are, or should I say Tony. Maybe you'd like to call Helen and come and sleep with you in the king-size bed. Looks like she won't be seen with Chessie. I don't give a fuck if you do stain the sheets. Go for it. Next morning, Rebecca took the keys to the Mercedes SUV and drove back to her parents' home in Kentucky. From there, she duly contacted her family's lawyer preparatory to having Troy Bainton served with divorce papers. That Sunday morning, Pastor Troy did not attend Woodlands Bible Church. Service there was a shambles. Neither the assistant pastor nor the youth pastor had prepared anything for an address. Indeed, they were never appraised beforehand even of the scripture passage for the day. The assistant pastor essayed a homily on one of his better student sermons from Bible College, but under the circumstances, the parable of the prodigal son proved to be an awkward choice. Not that anyone really noticed, that the congregation was consistently abuzz with revelations and embroiderings of the events of the previous evening. The same day, the chief pastor wrote a letter to the Board of Elders, tendering his resignation rather than undergoing the humiliation of appearing before them on Monday morning. On his last day at the pastor's residence, Pastor Troy cursed his stupidity, cursed Helen, cursed Norbert Chester Morgan III, but did not curse God. Late that Sunday, Chief Pastor Troy left the campus of Woodlands Bible Church for the last time. Before leaving, he used the church's access card to take the daily limit of cash from the church account and clean the valuables from the church safe. He filled his personal automobile with a Honda Civic hatchback with what few belongings would fit into it, leaving behind the cedarwood bedroom set, French provincial dining room set, full-size pool table, and other furnishings, all of which he has reckoned would fetch more than the cash he'd taken in exchange for them. A few days later, Chief Pastor Troy began to develop loathsome sores on his body. These appeared chiefly around his mouth. As a literal believer in Scripture, Troy understood this new calamity as a parallel to the story of Job. Previous disasters did not make Troy curse God, and so Satan had given permission for Troy's body to be covered by loathsome sores, and further demonstrating to Troy the hand of Satan in his misfortune. A more prosaic interpretation, even if one less in line with the literal interpretation of Scripture, might have been that he contacted the adorable form of gentle herpes from Helen, and that Troy should rightly have blamed Helen rather than Satan for his new calamity. Later still, Troy drove to Kentucky to attempt a reconciliation with Rebecca, who was staying temporarily with her parents. Rebecca, however, was adamant and even arranged to have divorce papers served on him at the Kentucky Derby motel room. These laid out in lurid detail the events of the evening of the marriage of Helen and Chesterton, and added for good measure details why her marriage to Troy was irretrievably broken on account of his many duplicities besides the adulterous one. Pastor Troy's disgrace it was viewed with a certain, if not altogether Christian, satisfaction by the clergy and lay members of some of the other Willetsburg churches. Not everyone had celebrated the growing numerical success of Woodlands Bible Church, many of whose new members were disaffected members of their own congregations, rather than new Christian converts. Certainly it could be said that charity for the transgression of one of their brethren was at least muted among the clergy and Christians of Willetsburg. The sense of schadenfreude was particularly strong among Willetsburg's evangelical churches, which contended furiously for adherents. They competed not only over soundness of doctrine, but over more temporal concerns, such as the abilities of their pastors, quality of their physical plant, caliber of their social and fellowship programs. Episcopalians and Lutherans, by contrast, regarded themselves as socially superior to these internecine disputes. Their harumphing was mainly confined to their respective parking lots and women's teas. In the aftermath of the events, it became apparent that Pastor Troy's understanding of John C. Maxwell's best-selling book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, had been flawed and superficial. A tightly focused leadership team that he had assembled was not in fact a team of visionary leaders. Rather, it was a group of sycophants whose principal function was to boost the ego of Chief Pastor Troy Bainton. In addition, Troy had entirely neglected number 21 of the irrefutable laws, a leader's values measured by succession. And no succession planning whatsoever was in place at the time of Chief Pastor Troy's abrupt departure. This left his team of sycophantic and second-rate seconds in command entirely unable to cope with the emotional and financial wreckage that ensued. Attendance at Woodlands declined precipitously on several grounds. There was the immediate aftermath of the scandal itself, the inability of the deputy pastors to replicate either the content or the delivery of the sermon addresses provided by the team of Whittaker and Bainton, and the complete failure of leadership which led the cell group leaders unequipped to inspire their churches in the faith. With the decline in attendance came a parallel decline in the tithe givings. Within 8 months, the $3 million mortgage fell seriously into arrears, and 6 months later, the First National Bank of Willetsburg foreclosed on the property. The wrought iron gates were padlocked, and the remaining leadership team members found themselves summarily unemployed. Let us conclude our tale by recounting the fates of the main participants 5 years later. Helen Sattersby is disowned by her family. She lives in a trailer park outside Willetsburg with her mixed parentage son, who will be starting grade 1 at the local public school next fall. She did not become pregnant through the agency of Pastor Troy, but through her liaison with the jazz saxophone player who had participated in more ways than one in the entertainment at her bachelorette party. When the parentage of the child became apparent at his birth, a goddamn half-breed was the most socially acceptable term used by James, her parents threw her out of the house. Like Elston, she's been erased from the family memory. Her only means of support is a small annuity that she received from her maternal grandmother some years ago when she reached the age of majority. She's not well liked by her neighbours, who find her accents rather too refined for their regional drawl. Even in her impoverished state, she can't escape the taint of having been born with a silver spoon in her mouth. At first, her mother Jennifer tried to keep in touch with her daughter. However, the arrival of her Cadillac Escalade in the trailer park only aggravated the neighbours' disapproval of the social gap that had at one time existed between them and Helen Sattersby. Jennifer stopped after the comment something less ostentatious. The other members of the Sattersby family now devote their emotional energies and invest their hopes and dreams into Helen's two younger sisters, Annabel and Margaret. Norbert Chester Noble III, on the advice of his wife Annabella, finally soured on the turbulent evangelical wing of the Christian church. Annabella pointed out that the Morgans had long since passed from new money to old. They had achieved the status of pillars of the community in Willitsburg. Was it not time, she suggested, they leave behind the repeated schisms and soap opera-like scandals of churches like Woodlands? And so within a year, Norbert and Annabel became adherents of St. Mark's Episcopal Church, where they now associate socially with other old money citizens of Willitsburg. Norbert has become a member of the parish council, and Annabel has joined the local chapter of Daughters of the American Revolution, which meets monthly in St. Mark's Parish Hall. Meanwhile, Norbert Chester Morgan IV has made a suitable marriage to Christina, daughter of the owner of Thomason's Lumber, another family prominent in the St. Mark's community. He is hopeful that the business will in due time pass into his control. Rebecca has soured of relationships with men. Having moved back to her parents' small town, she took a job as the administrator of a private elementary school, where she runs the office with almost military efficiency. She's become very friendly with another single woman in her walk-up apartment block. They socialize regularly and have been on a vacation to Florida together. Rebecca wonders whether she may in fact have lesbian tendencies, but is not yet sure. The increasing prosperity of Willitsburg and its environs in both manufacturing and agriculture has brought a flood of new residents to the town. Many of them are of Hispanic origin, both documented and less so. These adherents of Roman Catholicism have completely overwhelmed the facilities of Holy Rosary Roman Catholic Church on State Street. As a result, the diocese has explored and now consummated the possibility of acquiring the Woodlands site for a new church and retreat centre. And so, after nearly 7 years, the First National Bank of Willitsburg is finally on the point of salvaging much of the outstanding mortgage on the Woodlands Bible Church. The auditorium will be converted into a conventual sanctuary, though the plain glass windows with their views of sky and trees during Mass will be retained rather than filled with coloured glass. Ironically, trappings that the former congregants might have considered idolatrous, statuary, altar, vestments, are all on order, along with a parish priest of Filipino descent, Father Amaro, and the new parish of San Francisco will be consecrated 3 months from now. As for Troy Bainton, who left town 6 years ago with his tail between his legs, his most important possession is a large cardboard box that he took with him. It contains the accumulated sermons from the Herman B. Wickeder Institute of Homiletics, to which he had subscribed during his tenure at Woodlands. It would appear that because, like Job, he did not curse God, he had been given a measure of restoration of his possessions, even if not twice all that he had before. Well, maybe that will come in time. Pastor Troy is firm in his belief that Satan has been overcome by the forces of the Almighty. As the founding pastor of Crashing River's Full Gospel Bible Fellowship in Tiverton, 250 miles southwest of Willitsburg, where his past is not known, he ministers to a congregation that now numbers almost 100, in a building that formerly housed the now defunct United Methodist congregation. His new congregants, mostly young and energetic, are in the process of renovating the building, which had fallen into a sad state of disrepair during the long declining years of the previous occupants. However, the new owners recognize it will not be of adequate size if their dreams of growth are to be fulfilled. And on the personal side, Pastor Troy has gained both the eye and the trust of his volunteer congregational administrator, a pretty 26-year-old by the name of Hannah Miller, with wavy chestnut hair, wide smile and tight sweaters.